The opening scene begins with a young boy named Peter Parker walking into his father's study room on LY to discover his desk completely messed up. Just then his father walks in and quickly gathers some important documents before departing with his family. Peter's parents drop him off at his Uncle Ben and Aunt May's house, and then leave without any explanation. The movie shifts to a few years later where Peter is in high school. He appears to be smart but introverted in nature and makes every effort to avoid getting into trouble. Despite this, he's bullied by his classmate Flash and his boys. One day Peter notices CS4 Lash bullying an innocent guy in front of everyone. Having had enough, he stands up to the bully but ends up getting beaten. Fortunately, another classmate, Gwen Stacy, arrives and separates the boys. Later she praises Peter for having the courage to stand up to Flash, making him smile. The same evening, Peter and Uncle Ben are cleaning the basement when Peter discovers his father's briefcase. After checking the secret compartment inside it, he finds some documents. Peter goes through the papers and learns that his father worked in Oscorp with a scientist named Dr. Kurt Connors, WH. And he Googles for more information. He comes to know that his father worked in the field of cross-species genetics. He also discovers the news of his parents' death in a plane crash. The next day Peter goes to Oscorp in order to learn more about his father and his work. Upon arriving there, he steals the identity of a random student and enters as an intern. As he walks in, he sees Gwen, who is also a senior intern working under Dr. Connors. Gwen notices him and inquires why he's here, to which Peter responds that he enjoys science. Fortunately, she doesn't expose his real identity but warns him to be careful. After a while, Peter bumps into a man carrying documents with the same symbols that he saw in his father's document. Peter then follows the man to a biocable development unit, and as soon as the man leaves, he sneaks into the room. Upon walking inside, he notices an ongoing experiment involving genetically modified radar active spiders. Peter curiously pulls its string, causing the procedure to be breached and the spiders to fall onto him. One of the spiders bites him on the neck as well. On the way back home in the subway, a gang tries to bully Peter, but he appears to have increased his strength and agility. As a result, he easily dodges their attacks. After a while, he reaches home and stands in front of the mirror. To his surprise, he finds a radioactive spider on his neck. The next morning, he learns that he's developed spider-like abilities such as super strength, acute senses, agility, and speed. Later that day, he pays a visit to Dr. Connor's place and discloses his father's name, Richard. After learning that Peter is his colleague's son, Dr. Connors reveals that he and Richard were working on cross-species genetics to regrow lost limbs. Dr. Connors was motivated for the project as he himself lost his right limb in an accident. However, now that Richard is no longer alive, the research is still incomplete. Hearing this, Peter writes the secret formula on a piece of paper and shows it to Dr. Connors, surprising him before departing to plan to meet again. The following day at school, Flash is playing basketball when he bullies an innocent girl by spilling ink on her work. Peter notices this and approaches the girl to assist her. Once again, the ball comes towards her, and this time Peter catches it impressively. Flash, who's watching all this, comes to retrieve the ball, but Peter uses his newly acquired skills to bully him back. Unfortunately, during the tussle, he inadvertently breaks the basketball board, due to which Uncle Ben is summoned to the school. He appears to be upset when he learns that Peter has been bullying other students. Before leaving, he asks Peter to pick up and May in the evening. In the next scene, Peter heads towards Oscorp, and on the way he practices his parkour. Upon reaching there, Dr. Connors tests the process of limb regeneration on mice using the formula given by Peter. To their surprise, the formula works. Later, Peter returns home and sees Uncle Ben waiting for him outside the house. He then realizes he forgot to pick up and May, due to which he gets chastised. Uncle Ben also brings up his father Richard, who believed that people should always fulfill their obligations. However, Peter says what's the point since his father is no longer with him. After saying this, he storms out in rage. Aunt May tells her husband to leave Peter alone for a while, but Uncle Ben follows him. Peter goes to the store to purchase a bottle of milk, but he doesn't have enough money. Then a man behind him robs the store and tries running away. Uncle Ben, who's looking for Peter, spots the thief and tries to apprehend him. Unfortunately, in the process he gets shot. Peter rushes towards the scene, but it's too late. Uncle Ben is already dead. This sends Peter into a state of depression as his uncle was his only friend in life. The next day at school, Flash approaches Peter, who immediately pens him to his locker, but the latter reveals that he's actually there to commiserate with him over Uncle Ben's death. Gwen also tries to console him with a hug, but it doesn't seem to help. Later at night, while walking through the streets, Peter comes across a criminal gang. Still angry that Uncle Ben was killed by a thief, he approaches them and starts fighting with his parkour skills. During this, he discovers that he's also got wall crawling abilities. After that day, he begins confronting every criminal gang in search of the thief who killed Uncle Ben. In the midst of this, he also prevents many crimes in the town. One night during a run-in, he falls inside an abandoned wrestling ring where he notices a wrestler's face mask. This gives him an idea, so he prepares a mask for himself so that he can conceal his identity. Peter, being an astute individual, also creates a spandex suit and attaches himself does Zine web shooters, eventually becoming a local hero. Seeing him with his super abilities, the public refers to him as Spider-Man. However, the police believe that Spider-Man is taking the law into his own hands, and as a result the police force, led by Gwen's father, Captain George, begins searching for him. One evening, Peter is toying with a thief when the police hold him at gunpoint. However, they are unable to apprehend him as he quickly swings away. On the other hand, Dr. Connors is conversing with his superior, Dr. Regime Rafa, who pressures him to start a human trial so that people will also be able to regenerate their limbs. Dr. Connors immediately refuses because he can't risk people's lives for the sake of their experiment. As a result, Dr. Roth fires Dr. Connors and sees the limb regeneration drug formula. Later, Dr. Connors, who is depressed, injects himself with a drug and passes out. After some time, he awakens to find that his last limb has regenerated. However, the drug has a huge effect on him, transforming him into a large reptilian monster. He then sets out in search of Dr. Rather. Meanwhile, Peter is invited to Gwen's house for dinner. While eating, Captain George speaks against Spider-Man and says that he'll soon be arrested. However, Peter defends Biederman, referring to him as a public servant. This obviously causes some tension between the two men. After dinner, Peter and Gwen walk to the terrorists where Peter sharks, or by revealing that he is Spider-Man, he also kisses her, confessing his love for her. Just then, Captain George receives an emergency call and leaves, so Peter also follows him. Soon after, Peter arrives at the Williamsburg Bridge where he witnesses the reptilian monster hurling cars off the bridge. He immediately dresses up as Spider-Man and uses his web shooters to save all the cars. Seeing the arrival of Spider-Man, Dr. Connors departs. Peter then learns that a kid is trapped in a car underneath the bridge. Without a second thought, he rushes inside the car, but the kid is too scared to come out. Hence, Peter offers his mask to gain the kid's trust, saving him successfully. The next day, the police take over the case and issue an arrest warrant for Spider-Man. Peter is saddened by this news because all he wants to do is help those in need. Later, he visits Dr. Connors' cabin to inquire about the giant reptile. Dr. Connors, who appears unwell, claims that the monster can become aggressive if threatened. Soon after, he leaves, pretending to be very busy with his new project. Meanwhile, Peter notices a drug vessel on Dr. Connors' table. This makes him realize that Dr. Connors has actually injected himself with the drug. In the next scene, Peter proceeds to the police station where he tries to explain the truth to Captain George. He claims that Dr. Connors allegedly attempted to regrow his last limb using lizard DNA, but the experiment was imbalanced, causing him to transform into a giant However, Captain George isn't ready to believe in his cross-genetic story and sends him back. Peter then decides to confront the colossal lizard on his own, so he walks down to the sewer and sets up his camera to get some evidence. Soon after, Dr. Connors again mutate into a massive lizard and attacks Peter in the sewer. That to have an intensified bud. Peter's web shooters suddenly stop working and the giant lizard is about to rip his flesh. Peter somehow manages to flee, and after a while Dr. Connors discovers the camera with Peter's name on it. This is when he realizes that Spider-Man is none other than Peter. Elsewhere, Peter goes to Gwen's room where she assists him in treating his wound. As they converse, Peter reveals that he's responsible for all this because he gave the limb regeneration formula to Dr. Connors, and now he has to stop it. The following day, Dr. Connors arrives at Peter's school, scaring the students out. He starts attacking Peter, but the latter uses his web shooters to dodge Dr. Connors' attack and fights back. The fight continues throughout the school, and before the police arrive, Dr. Connors flees the scene. Following this, Peter asks Gwen to retrieve the antidote from the US Corp laboratory. He then goes to Dr. Connors' sewer hideout and learns that he's intending to spread the drug throughout the city in order to mutate humans into lizards using a cloud-generating device at Oscorp Tower. Taken aback, he immediately orders Gwen to leave the lab as Dr. Connors is on his way there. On the other hand, one police unit is attempting to stop the lizard, while the other unit, led by Captain George, is hell-bent on apprehending Spider-Man. After an intense fight, the first unit eventually manages to take down the lizard. However, it has super healing abilities that quickly infect the other officers with the limb regenerating drug. Elsewhere, Captain George's team captures Spider-Man and learns that he is none other than Peter. Despite this, he somehow manages to convince Captain George to let him go, claiming that the lizard is on its way to Oscorp, where Gwen is retrieving the antidote. Unfortunately, one of the cops accidentally shoots Peter, injuring his leg. Now he's unable to move properly and is facing difficulty while swinging. The father of the kid whose life Spider-Man saved previously works in construction. Seeing Spider-Man struggling to recharge Corp, he decides to assist him. As a gesture of gratitude, he summons all of his employees and directs them to pay Azishon the cranes properly so that Spider-Man can use them to reach the AWS Corp Tower. The traffic police even clear the way for him afterwards when retrieves the antidote and gives it to her father, instructing him to deliver it to Spider-Man. Wasting no time, Captain George proceeds to top of the tower, where Spider-Man is being overpowered by the lizard. He starts shooting the lizard and hands over the antidote to Peter, allowing him to climb to the peak and disperse the antidote instead of the limb regeneration drugs. But during this, the lizard tears off the captain's skin, severely injuring him. The lizard then heads over to stop Peter, but it's too late as the latter has already executed the process that eventually restores the humanity of Dr. Connors and the other infected police officers. Soon the tower collapses and Peter's about to fall to his death, but a revived Dr. Connors saves him in the nick of time. Peter then goes to Captain George, who's nearing the end of his life. He claims that the city needs Spider-Man, but Peter is going to make many enemies. Before he dies, he makes Peter promise to keep Gwen out of all this. From that day onwards, Peter has kept his promise by staying away from Gwen. He doesn't even go to Captain George's funeral. Seeing Peter's so distant and cold, Gwen also realizes that he made a promise, so she decides to accept it. One day at school, Flash approaches Peter and acts friendly, revealing that he's changed his demeanor completely. He's also wearing a Spider-Man t-shirt, which Peter compliments. In the final scene, we see Spider-Man watching some police vans pursuing a criminal. He then sets out on his mission as an official, the city hero.